On a quiet evening in Russia in May 2023, a father and his son, Andrey Michkov, and his son Matvey, sat together watching a hockey game. It was a simple, familiar moment between a hockey dad and the boy chasing his dreams on the ice. Then, without warning, Andrey stood up from his chair and said he was heading to the corner store and promised to be back in 20 minutes. He would never return. What came next was even stranger. A cryptic phone call, muffled and distant, reaches young Matvey. The voice on the other end, unclear, unreachable. Days later, his father Andrey was found lifeless in a pond. He was just 51 years old. The whispers followed that he had been working behind the scenes trying to break Matvey free from his KHL contract. It was a father's desperate push to see his son skate not in Russia, but in North America, where the dream burns brightest. But in a country where details are elusive and contracts blurred in mystery, the truth may forever remain tangled in silence.
Hammerlick now to Ramage. Tampa Bay trying to cut it to one goal lead. A shot, a score. Pados may have touched it. Chris Pados again, I think, deflected it in over the shoulder of Tom Barrasso, and it's a 5-4 game.
Rob Ramage, a respected NHL captain, a name etched in Toronto's memory. On a cold December day in 2003, tragedy struck when Ramage's rental car collided head-on with another vehicle. Inside with him was Keith Magnuson, a beloved former Blackhawk who never made it out alive. In a moment, hockey brotherhood turned to heartbreak. Ramage was found guilty on 5 charges, impaired driving among them, and sentenced to 4 years in prison. His fall from grace was public and painful, a stark reminder that even the strongest leaders can falter in a blink. But not all stories end with loss. Some begin with it. Travis Roy waited his whole life for that moment, his first shift in a Boston University jersey, playing the game he loved on one of college hockey's grandest stages. 11 seconds into his first game, he would chase a puck into the corner. One awkward collision with the boards, and everything changed. A fractured vertebrae, paralysis. His hockey career was over before it began. And yet what followed was not the end, but the beginning of something profound. Through hospital walls and rehab centers, Travis fought, not to get back on the ice, but to reclaim a life worth living. Surrounded by love from family, friends, a devoted girlfriend, and coach Jack Parker, Travis found purpose in pain. He built a legacy not through goals, but through giving, founding the Travis Roy Foundation to support spinal cord injury survivors. In time, a nation rallied behind him, drawn to his spirit, his courage, his will to endure. His was a story that reminded us, hockey may be played on frozen ponds and inside towering arenas, but its greatest moments often happen far from the spotlight. In quiet, unseen battles where grit, loss, and resilience collide. These are the stories that don't always make the highlight reel, but they're the ones that stay with you. Brittany Cecil was born on March 20th, 1988 to David and Jody Cecil in a small rural town of West Alexandria, Ohio. From a young age, she stood out not just for her love of sports, but for her spirit. She played soccer passionately and proudly represented her team, the Orange Crush. At just 11 years old, Brittany and her teammates earned a spot in the state tournament. To mark the occasion, the town's mayor, Carol Lunsford, proclaimed it Orange Crush Day, a moment that showed how much Brittany already meant to her community. At Twin Valley South Middle School, Brittany was more than just an athlete. She was a cheerleader, a member of the student council, and an honor student. She lit up every room she entered, the kind of kid you could tell was going to make a difference. For her upcoming 14th birthday, Brittany's father surprised her early with tickets to see the Columbus Blue Jackets play the Calgary Flames, an NHL game she was thrilled to attend. On March 16, 2002, she took her seat at Nationwide Arena, unaware that that night would end in tragedy. With just over 12 minutes left in the second period, a slap shot from Blue Jackets player Espen Knutson would deflect off Calgary's Derek Morris. The puck, veering off course, soared over the glass behind the net and struck Brittany in the left temple. It was a freak accident. Play continued and few realized the seriousness of what had just happened. Despite suffering a skull fracture, Brittany was able to walk to a first aid station, escorted by medics. She was soon taken to Columbus Children's Hospital by ambulance. Her only visible injury, a gash on her forehead. Doctors were optimistic at first. She was alert, able to talk, and showed no signs of dizziness or severe pain. But beneath the surface, a torn vertebral artery had gone unnoticed. The resulting clot and brain swelling would prove to be catastrophic. By March 18th, just 2 days after the game, Brittany had developed a high fever and lost consciousness. That afternoon, at 5:15 p.m., she passed away, just 2 days before what would have been her 14th birthday. Her death sent shockwaves through the hockey world. That Thursday, during the next Blue Jackets home game against the Detroit Red Wings, a moment of silence was held in her honor. The team wore her initials, BNC, on their helmets for the remainder of the season. Both Knutson and Morris, the two players involved, were devastated. Morris reflected, "You try to say it happens all the time, but you can't. You can always say, it's not my fault, but you still feel that it is a little. It was a terrible accident, and I cannot get it off my mind." Years later, Knutson would meet with Brittany's family, a step toward healing for both sides. At a June 2002 NHL Board of Governors meeting, Commissioner Gary Bettman addressed Brittany's death. It had been the first fan fatality in the league's 85-year history. "Even though over 800 million fans have attended our games, we wanted to do the right thing," Bettman said. New safety measures followed. Protective netting was mandated above the glass behind both goals, and the minimum height of the rink glass was increased to 5 feet to reduce the risk of another tragedy. Brittany's legacy lives on, not just in the hearts of her family and the community, but in the safety of every hockey fan who now sits behind the net, protected by the changes born from unimaginable loss. Bill Masterton's journey through the hockey world began with promise. A standout at the University of Denver, he led the Pioneers to back-to-back NCAA championships in 1960 and 1961. Twice named an NCAA All-Star, he was also honored as the most outstanding player of the 1961 tournament. Following a brief stint with the Montreal Canadiens organization, Masterton settled in Minnesota, where he continued to play senior hockey while building a life off the rink. Then came the 1967 season, a pivotal year for the National Hockey League. As the league expanded, the newly formed Minnesota North Stars offered Masterton a chance to return to professional play. It was an opportunity he seized, and he made history by scoring the first goal in franchise history. But his comeback would end far too soon. In the middle of a game at the Met Center versus the Oakland Seals, Masterton carried the puck up the ice at full speed. Just as he passed the puck off, two Seals defensemen, Larry Cahan and Ron Harris, closed in on him. The collision that followed was brutal. Masterton was knocked backward and struck his head violently on the ice. Like most players of his era, he wasn't wearing a helmet. Referee Wally Harris likened the impact to an explosion, insisting the hit wasn't dirty, just devastating. Blood trickled from Masterton's nose, ears, and mouth. Some even said he briefly regained consciousness, muttering, never again," before slipping back into unconsciousness. He was treated on the ice and rushed to Fairview Southdale Hospital. In the stands, his wife Carol watched in horror. His parents, listening from their home in Winnipeg, hurried to the hospital. There, surrounded by loved ones, Bill remained in a coma. Despite the efforts of 2 neurosurgeons and 3 other physicians, The damage to his brain was beyond repair. 30 hours after the fall, on January 15, 1968, at the young age of 29, Bill Masterton passed away. His wife, children, parents, and brother were at his bedside. Meanwhile, his teammates on the road in Boston received the heartbreaking news just before the game. In the locker room, they were told that Masterton had been taken off of life support. Masterton remains the only player in NHL history to die from injuries sustained in a game. At the time, few NHL players wore helmets. There was a stigma attached. Helmets were seen as a sign of weakness. Masterton's death sparked a fierce debate about safety. Lawmakers in New York even proposed helmet legislation, and the NHL considered mandating helmet use, though the league rejected the rule 3 times by 1971. Still, change came slowly. 3 years after Masterton's death, only 6 North Stars players wore helmets, the most of any team in the league. It would take more than a decade for the NHL to act. In 1979, the league finally required all incoming players to wear helmets, marking a turning point in player safety. To honor Masterton's memory, the NHL established the Bill Masterton Memorial Trophy, awarded annually to the player who best exemplifies perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. Few fans today remember Billy Tibbetts, a troubled enforcer whose name briefly flashed across the NHL scene in the early 2000s. In 2001, the Pittsburgh Penguins called him up after he notched an impressive 38 points in 38 games for their AHL affiliate. His impact in the NHL was minimal. Outside of a notorious sucker punch that earned him a suspension, Tibbetts left little mark on the league. Yet the fact that he reached the NHL at all was nothing short of astonishing. Tibbetts' path to professional hockey was marred by serious criminal history. In 1994, he was charged and convicted for the rape of a 15-year-old girl. More legal trouble followed, including arrests for assault and battery with a BB gun, disorderly conduct, and witness intimidation. Altogether, Tibbetts served 39 months in prison. After serving his sentence, despite being nothing short of a monster, he was granted a second chance. Against the odds, he clawed his way back into professional hockey, even managing to crack an NHL roster. His past still followed him. Due to his status as a registered sex offender, Tibbetts was barred from playing games in Canada, a rare and unusual circumstance for any NHL player. After a short stint with the New York Rangers in 2003, his NHL journey ended. Determined to keep playing, Tibbetts bounced around the minor leagues and overseas, suiting up for teams like the San Diego Gulls, Las Vegas Wranglers, Idaho Steelheads, and Rockford IceHogs, as well as various European clubs. In 2011, a troubling story emerged from within the Anaheim Ducks minor league system. Jason Bailey, a Jewish player for Anaheim's then ECHL team, the Bakersfield Condors, came forward with serious allegations against head coach Martin Raymond and assistant coach Mark Peterson. According to Bailey, he was subjected to repeated anti-Semitic remarks and discriminatory treatment during his time with the team. He claimed that his coaches went so far as to exclude him from team activities, denying him a seat on the bus for road games, and giving him minimal ice time. The reason, he alleged, was rooted in his faith and ethnicity. The coaches referred to Bailey as the Jew, treating his identity like a punchline. These words, and others like them, formed the basis of a lawsuit Bailey filed against the Ducks for discrimination. It's hard to believe a story like this was unfolding in 2011, a time when many assumed professional sports had moved beyond such blatant prejudice. In court, the coaching staff admitted to making deeply offensive remarks. This case served as a painful reminder of how far we still have to go in ensuring equality and respect for all, both on and off the ice. In the world of junior hockey, a coach is meant to be a mentor, a figure of trust and leadership. But for Sheldon Kennedy, that trust was shattered. His coach, Graham James, used his position not to build Kennedy up, but to break him down. Behind closed doors, James repeatedly sexually abused him, controlling his life with fear and manipulation. Kennedy remained silent for years, too afraid to speak out against the man who held power over his future. The abuse left deep scars, It shortened Kennedy's career and haunted his personal life with trauma. In time, Kennedy found the strength to come forward, and James was eventually convicted for over 350 sexual assaults against Kennedy and other unnamed players. Theo Fleury, a former NHL star and Calgary Flames icon, later revealed in his autobiography that he too had been assaulted by Graham James. Fleury's struggles with addiction and emotional pain suddenly made sense in a much darker context. Kennedy's story is not just one of pain, it's one of courage. His decision to speak out helped bring a predator to justice and shone light on a horrifying reality in the sport. Though not everyone knows Sheldon Kennedy's name, his story deserves to be told. It's a powerful reminder of how easily a child's dream can be destroyed by those who abuse their power. Graham James spent years hiding out in Guadalajara, Mexico, and his legacy is one of disgrace. He is a convicted sex offender who spent several years in prison for ruining the lives of multiple young players he coached in the 80s and 90s. Have you ever heard the name Brian "Spinner" Spencer? For those unfamiliar, his story happens to be one of the most heartbreaking and tragic in hockey history, one that truly deserves to be told. Brian Roy Spencer was born on September 3, 1949 in Fort St. James, British Columbia. He went on to play 10 seasons in the NHL with the Toronto Maple Leafs, New York Islanders, Buffalo Sabres, and Pittsburgh Penguins, before tragically passing away far too young on June 3, 1988 at just 38 years old in Riviera Beach, Florida. Brian grew up in Fort St. James alongside his twin brother Byron. Their father, Roy Spencer, was a talented mechanic who liked to unwind with a few drinks after a hard day's work. Roy was a tough but hardworking man. He made sure his sons understood the value of perseverance, and it was that work ethic that would take Brian all the way to the NHL. Brian was a true character in the WCHL, now the WHL. At just 17 years old, he left home to join the Calgary Centennials, playing 56 games before being traded to the Estevan Swift Current. It was during this time that Brian earned the nickname Spinner for his fast skating, hard checking, and reckless abandon style of play. After putting up 48 points in 53 games during the 1969 season, Brian caught the attention of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who would select him 55th overall in the 1969 NHL Amateur Draft. Following the draft, Brian played most of the 1970 season with the Tulsa Oilers in the Central Hockey League. But on December 12, 1970, everything changed. Brian's friends, family, and the entire town of Fort St. James tuned in to watch him play his first NHL game with the Toronto Maple Leafs, as they were getting ready to take on the Chicago Blackhawks. Brian had gotten the call-up and the opportunity of a lifetime. Brian made sure to tell his dad to keep his eyes glued to the screen as he was scheduled for an intermission interview, but there was just one problem. The CBC-affiliated station CKPG-TV in Prince George aired the Vancouver Canucks vs. California Golden Seals game instead. Roy, furious that he couldn't see his son's big moment, grabbed a firearm and drove 134 kilometers to the CKPG TV station. Enraged, Roy stormed inside, demanding they broadcast the Leafs game. When that didn't happen, he pulled out his gun and insisted they turn off the station altogether. Threatening staff, Roy claimed he had killed before and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. Eventually, the staff complied and turned off the station. As Roy left the station, unharming any of the employees, he was confronted by 3 members of the RCMP. Without any hesitation, Roy opened fire, hitting one officer in the foot before being fatally shot in the exchange. Now, despite this devastating news, Brian would still suit up for the Maple Leafs that night. Although Brian Spencer didn't register any points, he made his presence felt with his physical play. A strong debut as Toronto went on to win 2-1 over the Chicago Blackhawks. The morning after the Leafs win over Chicago, team general manager Jim Gregory offered Spencer a flight home if he wished to leave. However, Brian chose to stay and continue playing with the Leafs. "My father wanted me to be a hockey player more than anything else in the world," Spencer said. I think he would want me to play, and that's what I'm going to do. Despite the circumstances, Brian powered through the Leafs Sunday night game in Buffalo. He contributed 2 first-period assists. Later in the second, he dropped the gloves, and that night, Foster Hewitt selected Spencer as his 3rd star of the game. Leafs coach John McClellan had high praise for Spencer's performance, calling it one of the greatest performances I've seen in all my years around hockey. Brian would bury his emotions for years and pressed on, never taking time off to grieve. Brian would also carry around the names of the Mounties involved in his father's death in his wallet, yet he would keep his anger in check. Brian spent 2 more seasons with Toronto before moving to the New York Islanders, where he recorded 38 points in 78 games during the 1973 season. By 1974, he found himself in Buffalo, where he had the best years of his career, recording a career-high 41 points in 73 games in 1975. That same year, he would even reach the Stanley Cup Finals with Buffalo, though they ultimately fell to the Broad Street Bullies in 6 games. Buffalo became a second home for Brian, where fans adored his wild style of play. After 4 pretty successful seasons with Buffalo, he would close out his career with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And unfortunately, retirement marked the beginning of a tragic downward spiral. Struggling with drugs and alcohol, Brian seemed unable to outrun his demons. After retiring in 1980, he tried working as a mechanic like his father, but substance abuse soon took hold. Between 1982 and 1985, Brian was arrested 5 times for DUI offenses. In one infamous 1984 traffic stop, he even threatened an officer and made vulgar remarks, eventually losing his license altogether. But in 1987, things escalated much further than substance abuse, when Brian was charged with kidnapping and murder in Florida. The case was revolved around testimony from a woman named Diane Delina, known as Crystal in the escort world. According to her testimony, Crystal was assigned to a cocaine-addicted client in February 1982. She suspected that a man named Michael Delfo had followed her home. Crystal informed the authorities that she and Brian Spencer confronted Michael Delfo, eventually taking him to a secluded road in West Palm Beach. The following day, Delfo was found dead in a ditch, having been shot twice in the head with a .24 caliber gun. Crystal agreed to testify in exchange for partial immunity. However, the prosecution faced significant challenges. There was no gun or physical evidence linking Spencer to the murder. Judge Charles Burton acknowledged that the case was questionable, as Crystal had neither witnessed an altercation nor heard any gunshots. Former NHL players Dave Keon and Rick Martin even appeared as character witnesses on Spencer's behalf. Ultimately, in March 1988, Spencer was acquitted of all charges after the jury deliberated for just 1 hour. Despite the verdict, many people were dissatisfied with the outcome. Following his acquittal, Spencer expressed that he felt he had been given a second chance at life. But sadly, he couldn't break free from his old habits. Just 3 months later, on June 3, 1988, Brian was shot dead in a drug deal gone wrong. On the night of the incident, Spencer and a friend were driving around after a night of drinking in the Singer Highlands area of the city. During the outing, Spencer purchased cocaine at a stop near the old City Hall complex. Shortly after, a white Buick pulled up beside them. A man armed with a handgun stepped out demanding money. Spencer's friend handed over $3, but Spencer refused, claiming he had no money to give. The man's hand remained steady as he pulled the trigger of his .357. The bullet narrowly missed his friend, but struck Spencer. It pierced Spencer's upper arm, then passed through his lung, heart, and liver. In a panic, Spencer's friend hit the accelerator, sideswiping the robber's vehicle as they sped away. They eventually pulled into a nearby fire station. Some were very skeptical of the story. Martin O'Malley, who wrote a biography about Spencer, speculated it may have been an assassination. This theory stemmed from the fact that Spencer had received death threats from anonymous callers following the murder trial. O'Malley's book would later be adapted into the 1993 film by Paul Gross titled Misconduct: The Life of Brian Spencer. Sadly, many were not shocked by this outcome. At one point, Spencer's brother Byron even warned him that his new circle of friends, many of whom were drug users and dealers, could lead to his downfall. Some of Spencer's old associates even believed that he may have been capable of murdering Michael Delfo. a case that remains unsolved to this day. Whether Spencer took the answers to his grave remains uncertain. Spencer's killers, however, did not evade justice. Leon Lump Daniels and Larry Willie Johnson were ultimately charged with the murder. Daniels quickly flipped on Johnson and faced charges including second-degree murder, attempted robbery, and robbery. He was given an 18-year prison sentence with no minimum mandatory sentence for firearm use. Daniels received credit for the 441 days he'd already served, and his attorney predicted he would be released in roughly 3.5 years due to prison overcrowding. Daniels was indeed released on May 10th, 1996, but he was later arrested again and served additional time. Meanwhile, Johnson evaded authorities until his mother convinced him to turn himself in. Johnson was no stranger to law enforcement, having previously served 3 years for a similar crime. Ultimately, Johnson was sentenced to 40 years in prison and was released in March 2007. According to Daniels, the two men had targeted Spencer and his friend in retaliation after the pair had purchased cocaine using a counterfeit $100 bill. Daniels claimed the tragic incident was nothing more than a botched robbery. And as if Brian's tale couldn't get any more darker, his daughter and grandson would later die in a car accident in Oklahoma in 1999. In his NHL career, Brian Spencer recorded 80 goals and 143 assists across 553 games. While his life was riddled with hardship, addiction, and heartbreak, his story offers lessons about resilience, struggle, and the power of the choices we make. Brian Spencer's tale isn't just a hockey story. It's a reminder of how life's twists and turns can shape our fate. His story should not be forgotten. Alright boys, that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. It's been a while since I've dug into the shady, lesser known side of hockey, and I know a lot of you love this kind of content, so I had to bring it back for you guys. I've also been hearing from some of you that my videos aren't always showing up in your subscription box, so if you enjoyed this one, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and share it around. It really helps more than you know. And don't forget to hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks so much for sticking around till the end, and I'll catch you boys in the next one.